This is pasture.
This is premium. Is this the original land?
Mm-hmm.
With his incredible sense of humor and brilliant selection of farming content on the internet, there's no doubt that Joel Salatin lives up to his designation as the world's most famous farmer. And with fans at Farm to Plate Exchange lining up in droves to see him before his lecture last year, it's clear that he's not only transforming farming, but our perception of farmers as well. What do we really know about the man behind the combine harvester, and how did he end up getting so famous? Well, whether you're a fan of the man or just want to know more about the life and times of Joel Salatin, stay right where you are, as we're about to introduce you to the most famous farmer in the world. So strap yourselves in and get ready for an incredible journey, as things are about to get so interesting. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss out on any of the new videos we post. Who is Joel Salatin? Joel F. Salatin is an American farmer, author, and lecturer who was born in Venezuela on the 24th of February 1957, making him 63 years of age right now. Although he currently raises livestock on his polyface farm in Swoop, Virginia, things weren't always easy for the farming entrepreneur. His father actually worked for a major petroleum company back in Venezuela and used his immense earnings from the business to purchase a 1,000-acre farm. This plan of self-sufficiency did, however, backfire when the country experienced a military coup, with President Romulo Betancourt being elected in 1958 as a result. Similar to what appeared to happen in Zimbabwe some years later, the newly established president of Venezuela decided to create a program whereby land was redistributed to less fortunate, causing Joel's father to get the short end of the stick, losing everything in the process. Joel's parents then moved from Venezuela to the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, where they purchased a farm with the intention of starting all over again. Using their biblical understanding of earth stewardship and the works of J.I. Rodell, William and Lucille Salatin began restoring the land slowly but surely. This allowed for Joel to go to school in the great United States, which gave him the opportunity to work within the capitalistic society at a very young age. It was already in high school when Joel started his own business by selling rabbits, eggs, butter, and chicken from the farm at the Staunton Club Market, after all. He then moved on to receive a tertiary education at Bob Jones University, where he graduated as a student leader in 1979. It must also be said that in a move straight out of a romance novel, Joel decided to marry his childhood sweetheart, Teresa, a year later in 1980, who then encouraged him to work on his writing. And sure enough, this led to Salatin becoming a feature writer of the Staunton, Virginia newspaper, which later became known as the News Leader. What does Joel Salatin want us to know? Fans of the farmer will tell you that Joel is one of the nicest guys out there, and at the age of 63, has quite a bit of advice for the younger generation. When asked at the Farm to Play convention last year what advice he would like to give to the budding generation of today, Salatin paused for a second and smiled broadly. This was then followed by a message that everyone should learn at some point in their lives. Speaking on the topic, Joel said, "I'd like people to take away the message that you have to develop relationships. You have to develop partnerships and relationships, because none of us are good at or strong at everything that needs to be done. If we're going to get everything done from the financial and the how-to to the marketing to the whatever, it's going to take a team." Applied to farming, Salatin was clearly stating that farmers can only consider themselves to be experts in a few styles and crop yields. For example, with a successful farmer requiring a lot more, from financial knowledge to the use of sustainable resources, and since someone can't claim to be an expert in all the fields required to run a farm, teamwork is essential and what makes the dream work. This advice, however, can be applied to life. This is especially true when it comes to children, who are constantly told that they are special and develop a warped sense of importance. These kids need to hear that they can't be great at everything, as it's only then that they can make a success out of a business or a farm. Quite a lot of wisdom coming from Joel Salatin, if we do say so ourselves. Dealing with critics. Joel also tackled a question about critics, stating that it doesn't matter how great somebody is, there will always be someone out there who hates that person or wants them to fail. Unfortunately, that's just how the world works, with a number of people finding it necessary to put someone down in order to make themselves feel better. On the topic of dealing with these critics, Joel responded to the question by saying, "To the naysayers or the critics, they just aren't in my tribe. They're outside of my control anyways, so it's a big world, they can do whatever they want to. My dad used to say there's no point in pushing on a string. You gotta pull a string. Lead by example and be faithful and we'll do a good job." In other words, when faced with criticism, don't get upset. If it's constructive, use it to your advantage. Lead by example and make a success of yourself. If it isn't all constructive, then ignore it completely. And those who criticize you will always be outside of your control, regardless of how much power you have. And the best way you can get a critic to shut up is to obviously prove them wrong by being the best person you can be. It's by responding to criticism with such positivity that we can probably end up changing the world for the better after all. Now that's great advice, if we've ever heard some. His take on sustainable farming. When asked about the modular farming method he has made popular, along with how his perception of collaboration ties in with that, Joel took a moment to discuss what actually makes a farm sustainable in his opinion. Rather than the business-oriented view that a farm is sustainable by spitting out more income than expenses it has incurred, Joel took this a step further by mentioning that the sustainable nature of a farm rather than based purely on variable statistics. In his own words, collaboration, also known as creating a team, is critical for day-to-day functional working. My position is that a farm is actually not sustainable until it generates two different salaries from two different generations. If this is just a one-person show, then what happens when that person breaks a leg, gets sick, or has to go away, burns out? I'm after resilience. I'm after farms that are resilient enough to handle shocks. And to build one of those resilient foundations, do you want to have a team or a single person? From this answer, it's clear that Joel has all of his ducks in a row, or would it be better to say his cows in this instance? Either way, he shows a concrete understanding of what is necessary to build a farming empire, which is essentially what he has done throughout his lifetime. The success of the man was not achieved through luck, in other words, but in knowing that a farm can only be sustained if you train people you can trust, so that if you disappear for a week or two, you'll still come back to success. His views on freedom of choice. Joel Salatin has quite a bit to say on the topic of freedom of choice within the food system. It's no surprise that the government regulations are there not only to protect the environment, but prevent farmers from abusing their workers or livestock. And while this is great in the long run, an overabundance of regulations often result in farmers being forced to feed their microbiomes chemicals or foodstuffs they don't endorse. On the topic of reclaiming this freedom, Joel has gone on the record as saying, freedom of choice in the food system seems like a no-brainer, that we ought to have the freedom of choice what to feed our own microbiome. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are not going to give us that choice. That is not, however, a lost cause according to Salatin. There are a number of things that farmers can do to ensure that they are able to earn this freedom in due time, but there's no doubt that this will take some work. The first option farmers have is to push back on the regulatory environment so that some wiggle room is created. Where there is wiggle room, there's a lot more than where there was none. He also discussed another option, which is to essentially create circumventive platforms within the marketplace. Using the example of milk, Joel described this method as follows. The raw milk herd shares where I can buy a portion of the herd and they give me the milk. There are arrangements in the marketplace that allow us to redefine the transaction, and there are numerous ways to get around things. Joel ended this discussion on freedom of choice by saying that until true freedom is obtained, farmers will just have to keep pushing back, otherwise things will never change. Joel the storyteller. Last but not least, Joel Salatin has a pretty impressive grasp on what it means to be a successful farmer, and it actually has less to do with farming than you may think. He holds the position that storytellers lead their trade, and that you thus cannot be a leader in the farming industry without first weaving a little story of your own. Speaking to this topic, at the Farm to Play convention, Joel said the following: storytelling is the heart of marketing. It's really hard to market without telling a story. I'm the first to admit my communication ability in business is an unfair advantage. When I talk about farmers marketing, not all farmers are good marketers, as communication is not their forte. My point is that someone in your organization needs to fill that role, or you don't have a sale, and nothing happens until you have a sale. Salatin went on to explain that although this type of marketing often causes chills to run down farmers' backs, this type of activity can be the start of something incredible. And although it might seem like a waste of your money to pay someone to market on your behalf, it's not always the case that your products will sell themselves, especially in such a large market. Suffice it to say, Joel Salatin is clearly wise beyond his years. What do you think of the world's most famous farmer? Let us know in the comments section down below.